Good evening, workshoppers. We've got a combination of some good news and some sad news for this week's episode. Uh, you know, things are out there in the world. It's something that I've expected, and I've talked a little bit about, on previous episodes. But it does look like, unfortunately, BlizzCon 2020 has been canceled, though they might still have something for us in 2021. But we do also have confirmation that the PTR will be launching tomorrow. It's going to be May 28th here in the U.S. And much to do with. Of course, I went in. For those that are listening to the podcast on iTunes or what have you, or those that watched it on YouTube, as opposed to those that watched it live, I actually recorded a little snippet that I went and put in at the end of episode 186 to talk a little bit about the PTR because it was going through and was launching. But then, of course, by the time that I uploaded it, it had changed. So when I went through to start editing, the information had come out that, we're having a PTR soon. So I figured, hey, let me go and update the episode and just put a little couple of minutes at the tail end of the show to go through and say, hey, look, we've got the PTR coming out. We've got a couple of things. Here's some really big changes that are coming to the game. And then, of course, after going through and doing that, the PTR, of course, then gets delayed, after I have already uploaded it, so it's... So here's hoping. It's the same timing. I'm recording the day before the PTR, which is when I uploaded the last episode, which was the day before the PTR was supposed to go live. We have confirmation now. Adam Fletcher or Pez Radar has went through and has said that they plan on, if everything goes well, they plan on having the PTR go live tomorrow afternoon Pacific time on May 28th, which is a Thursday. We'll wait and see. But of course, before I start, going through, jumping into a deep dive on all things related to the PTR, let's get some of the other news out of the way first, since that's going to be taking up a lot of the big stuff. Of course, one of those first things is that, as I mentioned already, BlizzCon 2020 has been canceled. It's very sad news, though it is for the best with everyone's health conserved, and what have you. I'm definitely sad. The BlizzCon is like one of my big things I look forward to. Every year it's a big vacation I get to take, and it's also like the one time a year that I get to see all of my Diablo friends, my Diablo family, from all across the globe. But Blizzard has gone through and they've officially canceling the BlizzCon, for this year. They do add that they have some plans to go through and have some sort of virtual offering, but it won't take place until sometime early next year. What time frame exactly, we're not yet sure, and also how they're going to be doing it and what information they're going to relay also is still up in the air as they go through to try and figure that one out. As I mentioned before, there is the IGN Summer of Gaming that's going to be taking place next month that we know that Blizzard is going to be a part of. Maybe they might take that opportunity to share a little bit more information now that they have a definite confirmation that BlizzCon's canceled. They might be a little bit more open to sharing some stuff at that particular event now that their big press conference has to have been canceled. Especially with other big conventions such as Gamescom, likely not going to be happening this year. The Tokyo Game Show and other things of that nature probably just will not be happening. So these big virtual events are pretty much going to be kind of a symbolic or a symbol of what it means to have these video game presentations in 2020. But like I said, it's saddening, but it is, of course, for the best. Also, just wanted to give like a little bit of a reminder that Tyrael Funko Pop has officially went on sale yesterday. It's exclusive at GameStop only, and apparently one of the things that I've now learned is that it was originally supposed to be an E3 exclusive. But because, E3 was canceled, they ended up opening up as a GameStop exclusive. Yeah, if you collect Funko Pops or just a Diablo fan in general, you can go through and get yours. And of course, last little bit of kind of fluff news being the Diablo 2 ladder is going to be resetting here on June 5th, so just coming up next week. It's the D2 ladder is pretty systematic in that it has a reset every 6 months, typically in June and typically in December. You'll have those ladder resets. I'll probably try and fit a little bit of time in to go and play some. Maybe I'll even stream a little. Well, I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see on that one. But it's also pretty special because this June is also the 20th anniversary of Diablo 2, much like the 8-year anniversary that has just passed for Diablo 3. So we have a lot of, anniversaries that we're going through and celebrating in a short period of time, with D3's anniversary being May 15th, Diablo 2 being June 29th, as we go through and celebrate these great milestones. Especially people are still die-hard fans of the original Diablo 2. I say original Diablo 2 even though it's not the original, but it's the one that got most people into the game. I guess I was having a discussion, with one of my WoW friends about things like that, in that when people think about like the original Elder Scrolls game, they think of Morrowind, even though that was the third one. It's a lot of people. Will go through and think about the original just being like the one that got big, or the first one that they played, not necessarily the actual first in the series, which a lot of times ends up being a little bit lesser played or a little bit lesser known than a lot of the other ones. Some examples where that's not the truth, of course, is a game like Halo, where the original is what kind of like catapulted it into the mainstream culture. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to go through and give a little bit of a playtime back to D2. I ended up not playing this last ladder reset in December, so it'll have been about a year now since I last played D2. Especially with all of the continued talk about itemization in D4, what could they do with the skill systems and what have you. And of course, June is when we're going to have the next developer update, which is still on track for the end of June, as we talked about in the last episode. But as we go through, we've got some actual big news for Diablo 3 itself. The PTR testing is slated to go through and begin for this week. And to give a little bit more of an in-depth look into the patch notes themselves, like I promised at the end of the last episode, we have a new seasonal theme, which is the Trial of Tempest, which your character will occasionally every 2 minutes channel an elemental power that they'll unleash into the environment for a limited time. Whether it's going to be something like meteors raining around you, breathing lightning, and other such effects, they'll be able to go through and basically do damage or have some other effect all the way across the screen. So going back a little bit more to the season 19 style of seasonal theme, which was actually incredibly well received by the majority of the population, though caused a lot of concerns with more of the higher end players, and I'll talk a bit about that one in a little bit. But there will be a couple of new rewards, the seasonal portrait frame and pet, so that way those that want to stay dedicated and grind all the way back up to Guardian will be rewarded with some unique cosmetics, and then of course the actual changes. We're getting a new set for the Demon Hunter, and we're getting a new set for the Necromancer. And these ones are offering a little bit of a different playstyle from some of the things that existed before. The Demon Hunter a little bit less so. It's kind of almost combining Unhallowed Essence and the Natalia's sets together. A lot of people, of course, know Unhallowed Essence from like the multi-shot build variants, and from time to time the grenades Unhallowed Essence was up there. And that's because Unhallowed Essence actually buffs primary skills. Though, obviously not to the same degree that multi-shot benefits from other multipliers. And so the Gear of the Dreadlands buffing and being centered around primary skills is something that's coming a little bit from another set. And then the second portion of it is all around Strafe, which of course is another one that's kind of become iconic of the Natalia's set. Even though Natalia's itself doesn't really have any functionality around Strafe, it's just one of those ones that, because of the proc rates, in order to go and get the cooldown refresh on the Reign of Vengeance, worked with Strafe the best. And now this one, Strafe is an actual mechanic that you have to do in order to get the most out of the set itself, where it gives you your damage reduction as well as, proccing your primary skills. Is the 2-piece set bonus gives you a stacking bonus that increases the damage of your primary skills by 10%. The wording on it is a little bit weird. You gain a stack of momentum when attacking with each of your a primary skill. Each momentum stack lasts 2 seconds at a maximum duration of 10 seconds. Your primary skills deal 10% more damage per stack of momentum. And until we actually get the chance to get our hands on there and see how it works, there's a couple different ways that this could work. Do the stacks refresh themselves? So they last, each time that you use a primary skill, it refreshes that 2-second window, and then after 10 seconds total, it drops off and you have to rebuild them again? Is it that casting a primary skill adds 2 seconds to the duration all the way up to 10 seconds, and then using further primary skills just refreshes that total duration? Do the primary skills themselves does those momentum stacks not interact with each other? Can you drop some while stacking it still? It's worded a bit confusingly. There's a lot of different iterations of how that could be done, and that's a little bit of a theme with the 2 new sets in this particular PTR. The 4-piece set bonus, of course, casting Strafe will make it so that way you will automatically start shooting the last primary skill that you used. It also gives you your damage reduction for 5 seconds, and then while casting Strafe, you gain you move faster per stack of momentum. Sorry. So it's one of those ones where it's like you have to use a primary skill, then you start strafing. Strafing will automatically start shooting the primary skill. Kind of one of the consensus is that it will just replace the strafe attack animations with that of the primary skills of that you chose. So if you fired off a grenade, it's just going to be start chain lobbing grenades, or if you fired a bola shot, it's just going to be chain firing bolas instead. And that's another one that, to have the exact mechanics of the skill, we'll have to see. And it's also, when you go through and you start casting those skills, will they, how does that interact with your momentum stacks? We obviously hope that when casting those primary skills from within Strafe, that you will continue to gain stacks of momentum and they'll keep refreshing themselves, so you don't have to strafe stop, strafe stop, strafe stop. And then finally, the one that makes the build viable is the 6-piece set bonus. Is your primary skills deal 10,000% more damage. They're buffing a couple of the other offset pieces that have previously increased the damage of your primary skills or various individual primary skills to make them a bit more attractive for being used with this set, as well as just having those stacking damage modifiers in order to get it up into the top tiers to compete with other things such as the Shadow's Impale or Unhallowed Essence. So you have the Leonin, a Bow of Hashir, which now makes it so that way your bolas will have a Cyclone Strike effect, and that they will always pull enemies into the center whenever they're shot, and increasing the damage of bolas by up to 150%. You'll have the Emmy's Duffel, which causes the bolas to explode instantly and increasing another up to 175% increased damage. The Ninth Series Satchel causes Hungering Arrow to have a guaranteed chance to pierce and deals up to 600% increased damage. And with that guaranteed chance to pierce, will it just pierce infinitely? So when you fire those off, will they just continue to hit mobs until there's nothing left on the screen at the increased damage? That one I think has a lot of potential, especially when you're firing off tons of these. You know, if you're going through and stacking attack speed, you know, while going through and having the strafe shoot off the primary skills. I think that one has a lot of potential there. And then Odyssey's End, all your entangling shots now causes ensnared enemies to take 150% increased damage, making that a very viable buff slot, whether just in solo play or in groups. Hunter's Wrath, they're upping the primary skill damage up to 200%, where it was previously 60%. That is going to be a guaranteed part of the build, given that the faster attack rate with primary skills. And then the last change that they have for Demon Hunters isn't focused around the primary skills or the gear of the Dreadlands set, but it's actually a buff to Shadows. The Shadows is one of those ones where it has a pretty good skill set, but its damage has dropped off compared to what a lot of the other higher end classes are performing at right now. And now the Holy Point shot, in addition to throwing the 2 additional knives, which when it was originally implemented was a triple increase in its output, is now also increasing that impale damage by an additional 100%. And we imagine that this is going to be a multiplicative stacking and should instantly shoot Shadows builds up quite a few greater rift levels on just that change alone. The other big class to go through and gain a benefit from this patch is going to be the Necromancer. Now this one I'm really interested in. The Masquerade of the Burning Carnival is all about simulacrums. The 2-piece set bonus on it means that you no longer take damage from your simulacrum, which normally it would go and cost 40% of your health to cast. And it also now gains all the rune effects, and the cooldown is refreshed anytime that you die. I'm sure the hardcore players out there are loving that change. The 4-piece set bonus is that while you have Simulacrum, damage is reduced by 50%. This is an interesting change because this will make it so that way it's a little bit harder to try and stack this bonus with other Necromancer sets, because this is also the one that causes your damage reduction. So the damage that you take is split with your simulacrums, which at a minimum is a 50% damage reduction, where any damage that you take is then shunted over your simulacrums. And, you know, going through and maybe stacking this 4-piece set bonus with another like Necromancer set 4-piece set bonus just for the damage reduction, because that's the biggest thing that Necros have a hard time with, is just how squishy they are and what little access they have to damage reduction bonuses. That this one is huge. That they, you know, wanted to go through and stack that, because, you know, Simulacrum is a really big skill that a lot of Necromancer builds use. And then finally, the 6-piece set bonus, your win condition, is Bone Spear now gains 10,000% increased damage, and your Simulacrums gain triple that bonus. Which, you know, much like the Demon Hunter set, this is kind of taking, you know, from another set, the Pestilence build, which was all about corpses and Bone Spear. This one is specifically just Bone Spear. It's the only skill that it has that's going to be doing any type of damage that will allow you to push into those higher, greater rifts. You know, but it also, to go inside that, they are buffing the corpse damage component of the Pestilence set. So now Corpse Lamps in Corpse Explosion deal the 3,000% extra damage instead of just the 1,600 extra damage. And then Grasp of the Essence is being buffed to where instead of increasing the Corpse Explosion damage by up to 100% per stack, it's now 200% per stack. So it is gaining, you know, a little bit more utility there, and that's led to some people going through and theory crafting that maybe a Pestilence or a Legacy of Nightmares Corpse Explosion build might be like the new kind of Rat Run, because Rat Runs have been nerfed, as I'll talk about in a second. but it adds a little bit more damage, or actually a lot more damage to Corpse Explosion in the Pestilence set, giving it more of a place and a niche that they're trying to differentiate them. That okay, the Pestilence set really is just about the Corpse Explosion or Corpse Lance damage, and the Bone Spear is just kind of like a thing that you use to increase like your damage reduction. That's it. But as you know, speaking of the nerf to rat runs, Haunted Visions, your simulacrum now drains 1% of your maximum health instead of 5 every seconds and lasts forever. But they now duplicate Grim Scythe instead of Skeletal Mage, and this one is huge. Combined with another change, which is they are adding a 2-second internal cooldown to Reaper's Wraps. So that way you can't just spam health globes in order to get full essence anymore. Your simulacrum will no longer copy your singularity mages, meaning that you can at most get two max at a time. The speed with which that you can actually recoup your maximum essence is heavily nerfed, and this effectively kills the rat run build. Singularity Mage is a thing of the past. It is no more. There's been I know SVR did a stream where he was going through and comparing what you could potentially do with like some containment mage builds now, because they did buff the Rizef's Violation, which was the shoulder piece that added Gift of the Death Rune to Skeletal Mage. Now also adds Singularity, and you gain up to a 60% damage reduction when your essence is not full. So there is some potential for like Singularity containment mages that you can use for like AoE clears and other things of that nature, but it is just, you're not going to be able to cap your essence every time that you cast the spell. You no longer gain the benefit of the increased duration of the simulacrum from Haunted Visions, so you're not going to be able to have the double essence cap. And it's just going to be much more of a struggle at getting your essence cap for maximizing its damage, and it is just it is a very very different build, and the rat runs that you knew are just gone. It's definitely unfortunate. And like I said, there are some people that are already theory crafting that, oh well, Pestilence Corpse Explosion might be the next like iteration of that particular build, but we'll have to wait and see. It will probably end up being kind of like a the Witch Doctor spirits build, even though that one has gotten nerfed as well. But continuing on, the Justice Arms, which was the two-piece weapon and shield set for the Necromancer that increased your minion damage by 400% while your skeletons were commanded to attack a target, now also increases your damage by 400%. Not sure if that still applies to the minions themselves, because it just says you deal 400% more increased damage, which could still apply to your pets, might not, but it is now definitely some shift away from the minion playstyle of Necromancers. I was really hoping that the new Necromancer set might be something with Revive, and that it might buff some more of these like minion style builds, but it looks like that was not the case. They're actually, every day we travel farther from Rathma's Light, and it is sad. A minor buff to the Grace of Inarius. The 4-piece set bonus now adds 3% damage reduction instead of 2%. Going through and with the Wisdom of the Colin, now will bring you up to, what is that? That's an additional 15% damage reduction, which is pretty decent. Those little extra percents add up a lot. So you might be able to see some Grace of Inarius builds be able to push a little bit higher, especially with the simulacrums being able to copy Grim Scythe, making a generator Grace of Inarius build have some potential, with both the Necro and your simulacrum being able to just go and cleave down targets. Probably a Blood and Bone style build just for the additional scything attacks and scything damage. Might have a little bit of some potentiality for testing. I wanted to go through and look. And then, of course, as I mentioned, Pestilence 6-piece set bonus was increased, so now that really is just focusing on the Corpse Lance and Corpse Explosion damage. Crusaders have received another nerf. Shield of Fury now is capped at 10 stacks instead of 20 stacks. This will, of course, drop Crusaders down a little bit more, but still probably is the top performing Crusader set, is still going to be one of the best performing sets in the game across all classes. They're adding a little bit of a buff to Stone of Jordan. Now each of your element damage bonus is equal to your highest static element damage bonus. Or each of your elements damage bonus is equal to your highest static elemental bonus to skill. So that makes it, if you are using a build that is not 100% into one category, say you have an ice skill and a fire skill, they now will both benefit from the same amount of elemental damage. And you have a little bit of a potential to combo that with Convention of the Elements, since it's a rotating elemental damage buff that it in theory would potentially just keep that across all of your skills to have kind of like a permanent uptime, though whether that is useful to all classes, if that functionality actually exists, once it moves over to the PTR, that would still rival, you're giving up a ring slot just to have that 200% damage the entire time versus whatever your other ring might give you. Some classes that's a benefit, some other classes like a Necromancer not so much. Reaper's Wraps, the 2-second internal cooldown, which effectively kills the Necromancer Rat Run build. Mantle of Channeling now affects Necromancer Siphon Blood. Cool. And then Convention of Elements added non-static to the wording of the legendary powers description. Oh, I completely missed that part. So never mind. The Storm of Jordan cannot be combined with the Convention of Elements, so that one is a moot point. Very moot point. And then some skill changes. Final Service no longer consumes the pet of the Necromancers. Great. Bone Prison, the Simulacrums can now proc Bone Prison when they're going through and casting Bone Spear, so you have some potential to root targets in place as just another form of crowd control. Serration, so the 15% increased attack speed for those particular bone skills. Now the Simulacrums will also gain that benefit. And then Corpse Explosion damage increased from 350 to 1050, from 350% damage to 1050% damage, further making Corpse Explosion kind of like the primo go-to for Pestilence. Which also, not just that, the effect that this has on leveling. The Necromancer could potentially be like one of the fastest 1 to 70 leveling classes in the game, given that you can gamble for a Grasp of the Essence in early game and now just run through everything. The Grasp of the Essence was already a turbo multiplier in that leveling process, that with the increased damage on Corpse Explosion and the increased effect on Grasp of the Essence, it is insane. And then the last nerf will come to the Witch Doctor Spirit Barrage. The Phantasms are no longer considered pets. So one of the big things that catapulted this particular build to the stratosphere was that the Phantasms were considered pets. So the Enforcer Gym, Mask of Jerem, Reaper, Tasker and Theo, those effects added additional bonuses on top of the already insane bonuses that those Phantasms were benefiting from. Now, even though that this is going to be a huge nerf, we're talking like more than halving its damage, it is still probably going to be able to clear like solo greater 150s. That potentiality is still there. That's just how insane its damage is. It's still the best Witch Doctor set. It is still going to be one of the best trash clearing sets in the game, and it is still broken by all other accounts and means, even when you are more than halving its damage. So it's crazy. Just as a general idea of how bad that set is, and not bad, but I like more in terms of like badass. That set is. It is just way out there, head and shoulders above everything else that you can gut it, and it still is amazing. There's going to be a huge amount of meta changes in this particular season, from these set nerfs, without even knowing what these new sets are going to have in changing up the meta. Witch Doctors will probably more than likely still retain their place, and Witch Doctors will probably see even more play as there is a gap to fill with the Necromancer leaving the rat run slot of that high-end group speed clear XP farming in order to get those greater rifts, in order to get those higher greater rifts done in a quick process to farm your Paragon for the end of season pushes. There is some potential for the Necromancer to come in and scoop that place up again. It's kind of like, pass the torch to itself. Because the Witch Doctor actually would have replaced the Necromancer already in Season 20 if it wasn't for the seasonal theme, making it so that way Rat Run Necromancers were already just, far ahead of what the Witch Doctors could do. That even though the Phantasm all in all was a better set, for the amount of damage that you needed to, a Rat Run Necromancer, because they could stack on multiple weapon modifiers in the cube, were able to keep that place. That even though they really weren't capable, like the Rat Run wasn't able to compete with the Phantasm Witch Doctor in like the higher greater rift like trash clears, it just was faster than it in if you're chain running like say GR120s for experience. And now it looks like with the combined nerf of the Witch Doctor bringing it a little bit more in line with the other classes in the buffs to Corpse Explosion, it might just end up being one of those ones where the Necromancer just keeps stealing that spotlight from the Witch Doctors. They almost get their chance. Almost. But it's a big change to see this many nerfs in a single PTR. That it is one of those things that we've come to expect a little bit more from the new development team. The old guard was very much for the mindset of only buffs, no nerfs, and that of course led to insane power creep. That led us to the 10,000% increased damage set bonuses, 30,000% increased damage set bonuses, and that's kind of like where we ended up today, with some classes being able to like solo clear GR150s. The new development team that's gone through and taken over and has done a really good job of trying to add a better level of balance to the game. Doesn't have that same mindset of no nerfs, only buff. They've done a couple of nerfs in the past when things like the Valor Crusader got a little bit out of line. And now the Witch Doctor, the Phantasm Witch Doctor is a little bit out of line, and so they're bringing it back down. The Rat Run Necromancer has more or less dominated the speed clearing meta for years, and so they are kind of like putting an end to that. They're kind of forcing changes into the meta through the nerfs without impacting high level gameplay all that much. People will find an alternative build that will perform just as well as what the Rat Run Necromancers were doing already. The Witch Doctor is still going to perform at an incredibly high level. Crusaders are still going to perform at an incredibly high level. It's just going to come down to can you still clear a solo greater 150 without any issues whatsoever. And that's one of those ones where it's really going to come down to is what is an acceptable level of power in the game, and what is too far ahead. Is a class soloing GR150 when another class struggles with pushing into the 140s, or it can't even get into the 140 range solo? Should that one class be buffed until it can do a solo 150, or should the other ones be taken down a little bit and those 150 clears be a rarity or something that's reserved only for group play. I don't have an answer to that one, and it looks like the developers are kind of juggling around an answer to that question as well. I know something that one of the sentiments within the community is that power creep is looked on negatively, and a lot of people have issues with increasing damage or performance of classes across the board just for the sake of increasing performance and damage for all classes across the board. And it's an interesting change to see as far as like the mentality between two different development teams and how they approach the very same game. And it's not something we've really had a chance to see before on really many or any of the other titles. Like in StarCraft 2 or in Brood War, balance was something that was highly sought after and actively engaged in. Everything had to be balanced, whether it was nerfing or buffing, it all had to try and hit like a center line. World of Warcraft, they obviously continue to go back and buff and nerf classes, to have performance relative within one another, much akin to what the Diablo developers tried to do, but they weren't afraid to nerf things down in order to pull out the outliers. Whereas the Diablo team, were just trying to always buff the lower performers, and it created a game of leapfrog. But we've never seen a complete change in the development team and a complete change in the development process, on any of the Blizzard's other titles. To go through and have such a kind of like don't really want to say like have a hard breaks on how they changed it, because it's something that they've been working towards over a couple of seasons. In the beginning, they didn't start instituting nerfs, and when they did, they were ones that were like well called for. Like one of the biggest nerfs, of course, being the early testing of the Valor Crusader, and just trying to bring things all a little bit more in line with one another. It would be as we saw in one of the developer updates from D3 a couple months ago, that they have kind of a balance mentality in mind of like the whole you have 5,000 Paragon, you have this particular set level, and then the goal was like a Greater Rift 130. It's like taking those things into mind, we might see some more nerfs, down the line. Could they potentially nerf it to where no class can get a GR 150, or that maybe a solo clear of 140 is considered what is good? Was a good measure or metric for a class, and that anything above 140 is kind of relegated to those with 10,000 Paragon, or someone that's able to dedicate hundreds of thousands of keys to fishing for a perfect rift, or just group play. We'll have to wait and see. I'm very interested in the changes that they're going through and implementing. I am sad, of course, to see the Necromancer get hit with quite a few nerfs. I had a lot of fun with my Spirit Barrage Witch Doctor in Season 20. So at least I got it while the getting was good, before it goes through and sees some nerfs. And I look forward to going and messing around with the new Simulacrum set, and maybe some other like a generator, Narius Simulacrum builds, or what have you. But there is, of course, one other concern within the community that I kind of talked about at the beginning of this long rant with the new seasonal theme, and that is, it's giving a lot of people vibes of Season 19, which became the season of proc 500 kills when the Rift Guardian is up, so that way the Angels will clear the Rift Guardian for you in very short order. So you could actually, spend longer clearing your Rift than a lot of times at the higher end. That Rift Guardian would constitute a rather significant portion of the Rift clear itself for the cutting edge progression. That then in Season 19 became a lot less so, because the Angels would just one-shot the Rift Guardian. So you could go through and it's like, well, I've got 30 seconds, before the GR is over. I've got enough time to clear the Rift Guardian, which is insane. That when you have a seasonal theme, that's our only base, to factor any opinion of when we get a seasonal theme that does damage. That just everything in the Season 19 a Pandemonium event anything that did damage was crazy. It would clear the board of all mobs. You just stack a whole bunch of mobs together, get your 5 or 10 kills, struggle through those 5 or 10 kills, and then all of a sudden you've got 150 kills, and everything else just starts chaining and clearing more, and you kind of leapfrog from one massive bonus to another until you clear the rift, get your 500 clear, spawn the Rift Guardian, the angels kill the Rift Guardian, and you're done. It created a very different play style at the higher end, and so it was good in the respect that it changed the way that you play Diablo, but a lot of people didn't like it because now I'm not so much like playing my class, I'm playing the seasonal mechanic. And so it did put a lot of people off. This one, at least it has kind of like a time gated metric, but it might, people are just worried that if the damage is scaled too high, it's going to lead to similar things. You're going to spend 2 minutes just congregating mobs, wait until you go through, hope for a twister proc, and then the twisters will go through, kill all of the mobs for you, get 50% completion on the rift, and then spend another 2 minutes gathering more mobs. It goes through it, you get a meteor proc, it kills everything, the Rift Guardian spawns, you portal back to town, and then you wait for the 2 minute buff to come back, or you wait for the 2 minutes to cycle through again, go back in, you engage the Rift Guardian, the 2 minutes are up, you have the seasonal theme proc again, and it does enough damage to one-shot the Rift Guardian. That's the fear that a lot of the people in the community have. That you might have like these 6 minute clears, or that all of your high-end clears are just going to be iterations of 2 minutes, because it's going to be the seasonal bonus that ends up doing your damage and killing the Rift Guardian. And that's a valid concern. Like I said, we're basing this, of course, off of just a single instance, a single data point with season 19, where things were just scaled way too far out of hand. And it's a delicate balancing act, because you want that seasonal theme to have impact. It has to do some damage, but if it does too much damage, then your player power means nothing. What if it had like a set percentage base damage, that when it spawned it just did 25% of all of the monster's health, or 50% of all of the monster's health? It would still significantly speed up your clears. It would still change the way that you played, but you still had to contribute, quite a bit, to actually killing the monsters themselves. Having it maybe, or a system of gushing wounds, where it has percentage-based health with diminishing returns, or something along those lines. There's ways that they can go through and do it that will make it feel impactful, but it is a fine line between being impactful in a good way and being impactful in this is the only way to play. As a developer, you want people to engage with the seasonal theme and have fun with it, but you also you want players to continue to feel like, well, I'm playing a Necromancer, not an angel generating machine, because any class can generate angels. It doesn't matter if I'm a Necromancer. I'm not doing any of the kills. Who cares? But that's the very long and the short of it as far as the PTR patch notes go. We're going to have a lot more information, of course, on the next episode, once we actually have a chance to dive into the PTR, with fingers crossed it continuing to go live tomorrow, in order to jump in there and test some things. I hope to get some time on the Necromancer. Maybe I'll do a little bit of stream from the PTR and get a feel for what this new set does, as well as what some of the new mechanical changes will interact with like Simulacrum and Arius and all that other types of stuff. And then I did also just want to take a little bit here before signing off, that there was one more little thing. There was a Reddit post last week that generated quite a bit of discussion, and that one, let's go and bring it up here. Diablo 4 is much further along in development than we originally believed. Now, the user here, Poundcake, went through and basically was comparing the Fenris vendor build that I talked about on a previous episode, in what the build version of D3 was when it originally launched, and just kind of like comparing those build numbers to go through and show that they've had a lot more iterative builds in Diablo 4 than Diablo 3 had, and that it's that you have like it's significantly further along than we think. It's going to be coming sooner than we think. There's a lot more nuanced information that he goes into that I guess never really saw like the proof to like back those up, like claims that Blizzard is working very closely with Corsair with like their what is it, their RGB lighting SDK for keyboards and computers and stuff like that with the game, and that they wouldn't really be working on this type of stuff until it was like starting to get close to like a beta version or something along those lines. And I hopped on Riker's stream for a little while to go and discuss some of those changes with him, or not changes, but to discuss some of those like assumptions with, and a lot of it comes down to is like either there's like proof that he's not going through and showing, or insider information that we just have to take his word for it. But there wasn't really anything, backing up those claims of all these things that were happening with Corsair, and that's the reason for the vendor build, as opposed to like the Occam's razor approach that the vendor build is for the developers working on the game from at home. And also like the part about the build number, different developer teams, different development teams approach build numbers differently. And so just because it is a higher build number doesn't necessarily mean that it had more builds. Like, we don't know where it started. When they swapped over from Project Hades to Project Fenris, when they went from the Dark Souls, the alleged Dark Souls version of the game, to the more traditional isometric version of the game, that could have instituted, a number skip, in the build numbers. There's a lot of things that if you don't know what the starting points and then the iteration points are across a timeline, they largely don't really mean a lot, and it was just like one of those ones where it's like it's interesting. It definitely posits some cool questions, and it makes you look at things a little bit differently. But it was one of those that I think a lot of this is it's having to ask of making too many assumptions. And even if they were going through, and that we do have proof that like this particular vendor build was targeted specifically at Corsair in order to go and troubleshoot or work on the RGB SDK, around this time of the year is when they would be, beginning to go into the polish phase for a BlizzCon demo. They've talked about in previous BlizzCons that it can take them up to 6 months to finalize the demo build for BlizzCon. And so you're looking at that potential build could have already been in development for 2 months, and that they're going into the polishing phase because they need to have a workable demo that is also heavily polished in order to have it outwardly presentable. So your mechanics and your engine are down. And Corsair is one of the vendors that Blizzard has used a lot of times in their demo PCs in the past. So it's there's a lot there that could go through and say that maybe there is more work that has been done on Diablo 4 than we're taking granted for. But I don't think that it is a cause to hope that we're going to see something anytime soon. And it still is what is outside of Blizzard soon. Is not Blizzard soon 2021, or is it 2022? I wish I had an answer. I really wish I had an answer. But that again is we look to the June developer update on the progress of Diablo 4, and we hope that Blizzard's spot in the IGN Summer of Gaming is going to showcase some new Diablo 4 information, because outside of that, it's really just the quarterly updates, and we're stuck waiting until early 2021 before we hear anything, with BlizzCon unfortunately being canceled. But yeah, that brings me to the end of it, at least for these couple of weeks in news. I would really love to hear your thoughts on what all of this means. Do you like the PTR changes? Do you have any thoughts on what the Diablo 4 build versions could mean? Drop me a link at Westmarch Workshop at blizzpro.com, or you can follow the show on Twitter at the WM Workshop. Of course, you can catch me live here every other Wednesday at twitch.tv/BlizzPro at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And then, of course, you can find all previous episodes over on diablo.blizzpro.com. You can also go through and communicate with me directly. I'm at 9ballgamer on Twitter or at twitch.tv/9ball. I look forward to going through and doing some testing and potentially some streaming, here this weekend or coming up next week with the PTR. So keep an eye on Twitter, or my Twitch page, for more information on that on when I go live. Until then, thanks for listening to me rant, and I'll catch you all next time.